Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now from Washington is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Representative Bob Goodlatte, Republican from Virginia. Representative Goodlatte, I want to ask you about immigration in just a couple minutes, but first, 14 people have been arrested in LA where an anti-George Zimmerman rally turned violent. In Baltimore and in Mississippi, 2 people were attacked allegedly in retribution for the verdict. Protesters have stormed a Walmart, and George Zimmerman's parents are in hiding from an enormous amount of death threats. As a lawyer, how do you view the violence and the fallout from the Zimmerman verdict?
Well, it's very disturbing. We have one of the greatest justice systems in the world, and people need to work through that system. If they are dissatisfied with a particular verdict, they need to know that it's based upon the foundation of American law and our Constitution, and taking to the streets and engaging in random acts of violence against other people or their property is not the way to obtain justice in America.
Attorney General Eric Holder has announced a civil rights investigation into the George Zimmerman case. A number of black preachers are pushing for protests to pressure Holder into moving forward with this, but both current and former justice officials say it would be very difficult to file federal civil rights charges against George Zimmerman. Do you believe Eric Holder will file federal civil rights charges against Zimmerman?
I really don't know what Attorney General Holder will decide to do. I think that this case has been heard in the judicial process, and a jury of George Zimmerman's peers have made a decision that he is not guilty of the crimes charged. So certainly the Attorney General should look carefully at the evidence and determine whether he thinks any other laws may have been violated, but he should also do so with the objective of upholding the law and the principle of the rule of law, and not under pressure from any group to take any action based upon a political decision.
If Eric Holder does file federal charges, do you believe they would be politically motivated?
No, we have civil rights laws in the United States, and the Attorney General is responsible for upholding those laws, so it is entirely appropriate for him to review the laws and determine whether or not any have been violated for which prosecution should be brought. And there are additional laws that can be looked at here in addition to the ones he was charged under in that case. But I would argue very strongly that he look at it from the perspective of what evidence was brought before the court in that trial and the result of that trial, and then consider the other matters in light of that, and not in light of pressure brought to bear upon him by any political considerations from any viewpoint.
We learned from published reports recently that the Justice Department organized a pressure campaign against George Zimmerman and sent staffers to Sanford, Florida to help organize rallies, including one headlined by Reverend Al Sharpton, who called for the arrest and prosecution of George Zimmerman. Are you concerned the Attorney General is using his position on behalf of President Obama and his administration to agitate racial tensions?
We do have questions about the use of Department of Justice resources to help to organize protest rallies and things like that, and we are in the process of looking into that. But that is separate apart, again, from the Attorney General's responsibility as the Attorney General to look at the matter and make a decision about whether it's appropriate to take further action. We think it's absolutely important that it not be based upon any kind of outside pressure that the Attorney General receives. It should be based upon whether he thinks that aspects of the law have not been upheld, and that therefore further action is appropriate. I would encourage him to look very closely at the fact that Mr. Zimmerman has already been tried by a jury of his peers who considered much of, in fact, I would guess probably nearly all of the evidence that may be before the Attorney General related to other accusations, and take that into account in making his decision.
To immigration now, you and Majority Leader Eric Cantor are writing legislation tentatively called the KIDS Act that would create a path to legalization for young immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children. It's being hailed as an alternative to the DREAM Act. What can you tell us about this?
Well, we have not written any legislation yet, and it's important to understand that this would only be after we have legislation addressing the problem we have in this country with the lack of enforcement of our immigration laws. So we have already written legislation related to border security, which comes out of another committee, the Homeland Security Committee. The legislation which has come out of the Judiciary Committee related to interior enforcement of the law and employment verification by employers, only when we are satisfied that there is not going to be a repeat of the kind of illegal immigration that has taken place in the past, including parents bringing young children across the border, sometimes through tunnels, in the backs of tractor trailers, in cases some of which have been suffocated or have died going across the desert. We want to make sure that these kind of things are not going to happen again. But children brought here at an early age are not culpable for that fact, and if they have grown up here in the United States and have been educated here and now find themselves with no country other than their own because they know no other and have yet no documentation here, some kind of solution needs to be found for their status in the United States. And that's what Mr. Cantor and I are working on.
In keeping with its piecemeal approach, the House Judiciary Committee has already approved 4 immigration-related bills which deal with legal immigration programs, border security, and interior enforcement. But some House Republicans tell me they worry that if these bills go to conference, they will not resemble anything that House Republicans can vote for. Do you share that concern?
Well, I certainly want to make sure that we follow regular order. And so we don't call it a piecemeal approach. We call it a step-by-step approach to addressing all of the major areas that are in need of reform with regard to immigration. But it is absolutely essential that we continue to follow regular order and that we adhere to what's popularly known here on Capitol Hill as the Hastert Rule. That refers to former Speaker of the House Denny Hastert, who said that bills should not be brought for a vote on the floor of the House unless a majority of the majority supports them. So whereas in the Senate bill was passed by a majority of the Democrats, in fact all of the Democrats to my knowledge voted for it, but only a minority of the Republicans, in fact 70% of the Republicans in the Senate voted against that legislation, and for good reason in my opinion, because it puts legalization before it solves enforcement. That's the same mistake that was made in 1986. It gives a special pathway to citizenship to people who are illegally present in the United States, and it does almost nothing to address the enforcement of immigration laws in the interior of our country. So we have, as you've noted, bills dealing with all of those subjects. But it's also important that there be trust involved here, and that trust has to be earned based upon discussions that take place between the members and our leadership, and that took place when we had a meeting last week, and I'm sure further discussions will take place moving forward, a meeting to discuss under what circumstances bills would be voted on the floor of the House, under what circumstances we would have discussions with the Senate, under what circumstances we would have a conference with the Senate, and under what circumstances we might bring back a conference report to the House to vote on. And in each of those cases, it's important to me, and I think the vast majority of the members of the Republican conference, that we have the support of a majority of the Republicans in the House to take each step. And as long as that is adhered to, I think we will be moving forward to do the things that it's possible to do with regard to immigration reform with the Republican majority in the House, and not trying to do things where a small number of Republicans join with Democrats to pass something through the House that doesn't have majority Republican support. And I think the Speaker has been increasingly vocal about how he feels about that. He said that he would not bring any bills to the floor of the House unless a majority of Republicans supported them. He would not bring a conference report to the floor of the House unless a majority of Republicans supported them, and he would not even be inclined to go into a conference with the Senate unless he felt that things could be agreed upon that would have a majority of Republicans in the House supporting it. So all of that makes many members of the House feel more and more confident that we can do the will of the people that elected us to represent them with the confidence that we're not going to be led into a position where something will be passed that doesn't have that majority Republican support.
Representative Goodlatte, given Speaker Boehner's promise not to call an immigration bill to a vote without majority support of the majority, there is this perception, at least in the mainstream media, that immigration reform is headed toward a slow death in the House. How confident are you that there will be some kind of immigration bill signed into law this year?
Well, while I don't agree with the Senate bill, and therefore I don't have the same approach to this that Senator Marco Rubio, one of the Gang of Eight in the Senate, but someone who I admire and who has worked very hard on addressing this issue. I do agree with him that we have a deeply flawed immigration system that has effectively no president, and not just the current president, since the 1986 law, enforcing the law. Therefore, we have de facto amnesty, we have a lack of enforcement, and we have missed opportunities in terms of immigration reforms that would help to grow our economy and create more jobs for Americans. I do think that the Republicans in the House have very good ideas about how to address all of the areas of major immigration reform, and we should continue to move forward in this step-by-step approach to attempt to solve all of those problems. But we've got to do it the right way, and we should not feel pressured by the Senate or the President, nor should we feel pressured by any timetable. It is far more important to me that we get immigration reform right than that we get it done quickly, because quickly probably means that it gets done wrong. And let me just say about the Senate bill, while they did have, an amendment opportunity in the Judiciary Committee and on the floor of the Senate, they held one hearing on that bill prior to it going to a markup in the Judiciary Committee. We've already held nearly a dozen hearings on various aspects of immigration reform in the House Judiciary Committee, and other committees have held hearings as well. So we're being very deliberative. We know there's a problem here that needs to be fixed, but we're not going to do it the way the Senate did it.
You just mentioned the importance of not rushing reform, but does the GOP risk losing Hispanic and Latino voters permanently if it doesn't act on immigration reform this year? I
think it is far more important to get this policy right, and I think that good politics follows from good policy, than it is to try to pass legislation based upon the political considerations of pundits and others who say that Republicans have to pass this in order to get votes of one segment of our electorate. I think there are many, many other issues that Latino voters look at, and I think there are many, many other priorities that Republicans have as well, and we should be looking for our good conservative policies. And when we pass those, we should then take those out and sell them to the voters as the right thing to do for America.
Last question, Representative, is on Obamacare. House Republicans vote this week on whether to delay not only the employer mandate, but also the individual mandate. How do you plan to vote? And is the Republican game plan to delay aspects of this legislation at least until there's a new administration in the White House?
Well, we should repeal Obamacare, and I and virtually every other Republican in the House have voted repeatedly to repeal it outright. We've also voted to defund it. We've also voted to repeal parts of it. We've also voted to defund parts of it. Now the administration has come forward and said unilaterally, and perhaps without constitutional authority to do so, that they're going to delay the implementation of the employer mandate for 1 year. Well, any delay of implementation of this bad law is a good thing, but we think that it is ironic that the administration, trying to make this very bad law work, would delay one part of it when they would continue to require that individuals be mandated to buy this insurance, when they're the ones who are going to bear the ultimate brunt of all of it. So therefore, this week we're going to have a vote on delaying both the employer mandate and the individual mandate, and I'll be voting for both of those. But of course, I will continue to be pushing the administration and others to recognize that this house of cards needs to collapse outright. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing health care reform, but there are many good market-based and patient-focused reforms of healthcare that would help to hold down costs for consumers and to make healthcare more available to more people. And it's not by having more big government involvement in it, which is what Obamacare is all about. The law of unintended consequences is running rampant through the Obamacare law and starting to pull it down, and we need to make absolutely sure that we're doing everything possible to give this administration the opportunity to change their mind, to back away from it, while never failing to take the opportunity to pass legislation repealing it, or in this case, at least delaying it, because that's what we have the opportunity to do this week. But our ultimate goal is to repeal this legislation and start over again on health care reform.
Representative Bob Goodlatte, Republican from Virginia, thanks for being with us today. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.